There we go. Now it's official. The lady has told us. So yeah, welcome. Really good to have you here. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. We have some really interesting panelists with us from different sides of the story. So from people who are actually involved in transaction and facilitating those, and also who provide the actual software to provide the tools to actually offer this product offering and service offering to your clients. So it's a nice spread. And we're just going to start off by giving everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So Inga, if we could start with you, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and then also easy.com, your business. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much for this opportunity and for everyone taking time out to join us today. So I'm Inga Prince, and I'm the marketing manager of Easy Real Estate. So we're a full service agency. My background, before I joined Easy, it's the first time that I'm within the real estate or property landscape. Before that, I was part of a fintech company. And prior to that, I was in the advertising landscape, working across multiple FMCGs, banking, different various kind of products within advertising. And then in terms of Easy Real Estate, my primary focus at the company is lead generation. So making sure that we get enough lead in the business. But Easy Real Estate is a full service real estate residential sales agency. We focus in the Cape Metro and some surrounding winelands. And then the key difference in why we're here today is that we've got a centralized platform that facilitates everything from start to finish. It's a bespoke built system that's built on technology or on the cloud. So that's pretty much me at Easy Real Estate.
Fantastic. Thank you, Inga. Great to have you with us. Wayne, if I could hand over to you.
Yeah, so hi guys, my name is Wayne Berger and I'm the managing partner of Arshak Ventures and a director at Instant Property. How Instant Property plays in this particular industry: Instant Property is a software as a service provider to the real estate industry, trying to make life easier for the landlord, easier for the broker or agent, and easier for the tenant. In this particular case, on the transaction side, Instant Property offers software as a service in the online auction and tender, or online auction sales and tender spaces.
Great stuff, Wayne. Thanks very much for the intro. Next, I'm going to hand over to Clint and Aidan from Bidstream. Oh, Clint, you're just on mute there. Just give you a moment there. Have you got
okay, there we go. The gremlins are out the way. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Normally it's me that does the talking on
okay.
Mute. So thanks for taking the bats in this time. Yeah.
All right. So thanks again for the introduction, Sean. I'm Clint Grunbeck. I'm the National Sales Manager for Bidstream. It's a purely online end-to-end platform which connects buyers directly to sellers, working on a bidding model or an auction principle. We have offices around the country, and we were born off the back of our industrial and our commercial brokerages, which is CRE Africa and Warehouse Finder. And we have our own in-house architects, design team. So as a cliche as what it is, we are a full one-stop shop. I've been in the industrial property industry for about 5-6 years now. I have been in real estate previously to that, but obviously fallen in love with the industrial and the commercial side of things. Before that, I operated in a very different space, which was part of the whole environmental field. So yeah, a very different market coming into property, but it's a small family and we love it.
Awesome, thanks. Great to have you with us as well. And Aidan, if you'd mind introducing yourself.
Good day all. It's Aidan here from Bidstream. Just mute yourself there. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, a bit of yeah. Maybe there's another sound.
Yeah. Just put your volume down, please. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries. Okay.
No, there you go.
Aidan, yeah, we'll come back to you. Don't worry. This happens. Everyone, thanks for the introduction. It's really great to have quite a diverse panel here. I think everyone's got quite a lot to offer on the topic at hand around property transactions and how things are changing. I think everyone's been active in the space for a few years and coming from different sides of the coin, which is really great. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to start us off here with our first question and talking point. So I wanted to ask, what do you think are the main pain points regarding the property transaction process in SA, and how do you feel that Proptech can and is addressing these at the moment? And also linked to that, what do you think are the key differences and perhaps similarities between commercial and residential? So are there certain things that are very different, or are you seeing solutions that kind of can plug into any both sectors and different types of property? So Inga, perhaps you can start us off with that, please.
No problem. So I think one of the biggest challenges, or two challenges in terms of, in our business, we focus solely on sales within a residential space. So we don't really touch on the challenges of rentals. And one of the, I think, currently biggest challenges that we hope that will get solved soon is signatures, in terms of still needing to be physical signatures and just how that impacts the transaction. Especially we've seen it now during times when people aren't close to printers as much. And then I think secondly, connected to that is the deeds process, and a lot of different properties of various prices and just the issues of, of having properties registered, the cost thereof, and also, especially in the lower end where those transactions don't always happen through the formal processes. So I think those are two major components of the sales transaction that represents challenges. And if those things were easier, I would really be a game changer in terms of what Proptech could do. In terms of solutions, I know that there are various industries, from fintech, banking, etc., working on the digital signature question and how that would link up with biometrics with Home Affairs. So hopefully in the not too far future, we would be able to have digital signatures being binding. And in terms of the deeds office, I know that they're also looking in terms of how do we digify the deeds office. And currently I'm not aware of any Proptech company specifically working on that. I know that the signature side has a big push from banking and investments and all the different kind of sectors and the benefits that would hold.
Excellent, thank you, Inga. Yeah, I totally agree. It's something I was just going to highlight as well, is that there's a lot of exciting activity around the transaction and enabling the listing, the marketing, and then various steps of the process leading up to the transaction itself. But obviously all of that is still tied to the deeds office and that still fairly manual process. So that's something I've been following interesting, like across the continent, is like digital land information systems, or basically digital deeds registries. And there is some great activity. Kenya's just launched theirs actually recently, which is quite encouraging. There's a few countries looking at it. And in South Africa, I know there's a pilot project that was actually being carried out in the lower, the more affordable segment of a housing market in Khayelitsha. So there is some activity happening, but it's obviously a massive undertaking, and there'd be a lot of work between public and private sector. But yeah, that would kind of push things into the next realm. But it's interesting to see how Proptech is already helping in a big way. Yeah, so thanks for those points. But yeah, next, Wayne, if I could hand over to you on that point.
Yeah, well, excuse me. So just to expand on what Inga mentioned, that blockchain, a lot of deed registries are looking at blockchain. And I know there's a international technology called Ubiquity, which specifically looks at deeds registries. But I mean, before we get to let's say the transaction, with a property transaction, you also have to do the viewing. So it was quite interesting during COVID. There was a big need to be able to take both the viewing of the property and, let's say, the transaction online. So Inga mentioned the digital signature, and that's one of the big, let's say, bottlenecks in terms of transactions moving online. We mentioned the deeds registry as another bottleneck, and it's a big bottleneck. But what has definitely progressed is the listing of real estate online, the opportunity to use technologies like Matterport, where you can do, let's say, walkthroughs on that property online. And then most recently, which has become more and more prominent, is the ability to do a online auction or tender. So that's just stuff that we've really seen that's come to the front. And then obviously the way the transactions will be paid in the future, where you're considering cryptocurrency, where you see different countries are starting to consider Bitcoin, especially in South and Central America, as legal tender. You're going to actually see the way in terms of currency, how properties are transacted is going to change. And the last thing just to mention, there will also be crowdfunding will change the way that people are actually buying properties. So these are just a few points to bring up.
Awesome, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, definitely, it's an area where there's a lot to kind of watch and see, and obviously there's a few technologies and trends that are definitely worth keeping an eye on. I think things could change quite a lot. You know, some things might take more time as to be implemented. You know, things like the regulatory environments, etc., and obviously public sector infrastructure. But it's being done elsewhere, so it's definitely possible. So yeah, thanks for that. Clint, just to hand over to you. So we just to refresh what pain points you see in the property transaction process, or what have you seen in the past, and how do you see Proptech addressing these at the moment?
So in my opinion, being able to fully adopt a digital approach to everything, I think it's important that we also analyze our data. I don't think that's happening enough. When I say data, we need to understand where interest is coming from. I mean, we all have access to analytics. We might find, as an example, 55% of our on-site viewers are female. Of that, 35% might be searching in the wine and fine food categories. Of that 35%, maybe 17% comes from Santon. So keeping this in mind, it's so counterintuitive to be advertising on dustbins, for example, in Florida North or wherever the case is. So to me, that's the biggest pain point, in that the data is there and we can really use it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the adoption of data across different areas of PropTech, I think there's a lot more to be done there. Like you say, there's a lot of value in that data. So I think what we're currently seeing in this transaction space is companies and products are using that better. And there's still a lot more, I think, that could be done. And that's another thing linked to like a digital deeds registry. There's such a wealth of data, but people are still doing good things. Lightstone and others like them provide some really good insights. So, it is out there, I think, if you want to tap into it and utilize it in a different way. So, yeah, thanks very much for that. The next point I wanted to raise, I see Inga's got a colleague with her as well. Maybe we'll introduce her later.
Yeah, my cat, she sleeps the entire day, and then as soon as I start speaking to my screen, she's like, who's there?
Cats know they'll only raise their heads when they're going to cause some disturbance or something, but it's more than okay. So yeah, next point, let's jump on to further to what we've just discussed. I think some of it's been highlighted, but I just wanted to ask everyone their opinion and perhaps highlight key things. So where are you seeing the most growth in transactional PropTech at the moment, and where could we be heading within the space? Inga, if you could start us off on that one, please.
So, in terms of PropTech, the way that we see it is that technology is going to enable real estate agents or property professionals to do their jobs better. And the more your information is centralized and speaks to each other in terms of being able to take those learnings and understanding data, from the beginning to end, and how it impacts, efficiency and what you're able to do. So I think PropTech is going to help anyone that's willing to use it in the right way to be better at their job and be more efficient. But as we briefly discussed before we came into the session, I don't think it's ever going to remove your property professionals from the transaction because they play a key role. So in terms of, how technology is changing our business, it's enabling a single real estate agent to do 2 or 3 or 4 times more than what someone would be able to do without that system, because we're only human, and I think that's the key difference. It's enabler to do more, and also to be more transparent, to be more on demand, available 24/7 in terms of the virtual landscape. So I think the possibility and the changes that are going to come are endless. It's depending on the adoption. In South Africa, as most of us know, buyer leads or rental leads have pretty much been commoditized by Property24 or private property. So it's going to be very difficult to innovate on that end. I know that there are some interesting innovations in that space in other places in the world. But in terms of, from our side, I think it's about efficiency, and then bringing value to consumers. And I think Proptech and use of technology is going to become, or is already essential to be able to do your job. So I think it's very difficult to remove them from each other. And it's just as all of us, technology is intertwined with our lives. I think the same applies to the real estate landscape.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks. Some really, really valid points there. And it's something I agree with, and I always say myself is, within the property space, particularly within transactions, there's definitely a place for doing things, the traditional way, but there's also, like you said, linked to the way our world's changing and how we interact and consume all sorts of services and products. Technology is obviously playing an increasing role. So as we've seen, there's definitely space in the market for, tech-enabled offerings. And then there's space for those like traditional agents, etc., to embrace technology to do things in a different way and offer their clients different options. So I think that's a really important point, and something we'll actually come back to in a moment. Wayne, if I could ask you on your view, where you see the most growth at the moment.
Yes. So first of all, what we're seeing a lot of, we see the increase in adoption. Well, first, the interest in adoption and the interest in Proptech has really exploded. And then a trend that I see happening, which happens in every industry, you get the 6 Ds of disruption. You can go check them out. But really what it's saying is that technology over time is going to become cheaper and more accessible. So for instance, when we consider our first version of our auction and tender platform was about 2014, and it was very expensive for us to build it then. Then fast forward to 2021, if we wanted to license our software today, we would have one option that's free, where you get a multi-prop auction page or auction and tender page, one option that's just web, and one option that's web and app. So the speed to market, the cost to market has definitely increased over that period. And just to add to that, the other thing that I see is you're going to get more integrated solutions. So today, from a technical term, you get something called an SDK or an API. Really, it's 2 ways for 2 systems to speak to each other, to share data and work together. So in summary, cheaper and more accessible technology, and more integrated. And the key to ask yourself as a property professional, are you a property professional or are you a technology company? And if you wish to be a technology company, then most likely you're going to look to build your own solution. If you're more of a property professional, then you're probably going to look for a mix of technologies that you can license and integrate to solve your day-to-day needs.
Great, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, it's interesting as a service provider in this space to the property companies and professionals. It's really interesting to hear your insights and obviously learn about the different options there are to embrace tech, because I think it's maybe sometimes an area where there's a bit of uncertainty and perhaps misinformation, but there are some great products out there that help you embrace things, in a fairly straightforward and adaptable way. So that's a really good point, I think, to make. Clint, from your side, where have you seen the growth since entering the sector and now entering the PropTech space?
So I agree 100% with Inga's comment in terms of traditional agents still needed. You know, I thought it was quite funny at the last the private property conference 2 or 3 years back. It was an interesting debate between Ryan Goslet and Marcel Dutoit, Remax and Lead Home respectively. And whatever Marcel was saying regarding operating in the online space, we could hear all the agents, you know, clicking their tongues, and we could see them shaking their heads. And you know, the point I want to make is that traditional agents don't need to fear digital change. No matter how digital we get, there will still be a human element that is involved. But we need to think for ourselves how we can use this to increase our productivity and streamline our processes. I also believe that it's so easy to get distracted with everything that's out there, all the online tools and so on, though. So we need to ask ourselves, you know, in terms of a guideline, how streamlined is our process? How cost effective is our process? What is the time of delivery on what we promise? And then most importantly, how are we keeping our buyers and our sellers engaged?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's another good point. Like further to what Wayne was highlighting there, in terms of knowing what to do. It's also hard to assess it and making sure that it's actually going to add value and use the right metrics to look at these things. Because I mean, just because it looks great and it is using tech doesn't mean it's the best fit. So I don't,
for sure,
not to rush into anything. So yeah, some really good points you make there. So thanks for that. Moving ahead then. Probably again, I think we've touched on a few things, but I just wanted to ask, you know, what are the main barriers for PropTech or innovation in the transactional space, particularly maybe things you've encountered in your own work and sort of delivering your own service or product in the space. Inga, if you want to jump on that first for us, please.
So Easy Real Estate, we had a lot of learnings and different challenges over different spaces. You know, we very soon learned that you need to have a very qualified agent facilitating the transaction. So in terms of the challenges now, I must say over the last year, the ease of use and adoption of clients being able and willing to use technology has increased, you know, substantially with the kind of speed up of your digital economy with us all working from home. In terms of the biggest barriers for us is, you know, the connection of technology being seen as not full service, or, you know, customers thinking that at some point that, you know, it's not going to be as hands-on and that I'm not going to have a person to speak to. So in terms of, I think, your integrated technology systems with full service companies, the kind of biggest barriers that we're dealing with are customer perception of what that service means. But further than that, I think we've progressed quite a bit in terms of how consumers interact and their willingness and understanding. And then I think it's just the, you know, the biggest challenges is, I would also say, is just the legislation and regulation catching up with where we are in terms of technology, and being able to facilitate the systems and processes where you ensure that businesses are still able to operate and you still protect consumers' rights and privacy. I think those are, on a broad stroke, the things that I would say are presently challenges of things we haven't touched on before.
Yeah, good, no, great points. I mean, I think the customer, I guess, customer education and customer confidence, you know, building that confidence, which is the same with any new way of doing something coming to market. And then that regulatory environment, it's consideration for a lot of different types of tech, like Wayne touched on crowdfunding. So we're seeing some activity in SA, but I think a lot more could happen once the regulatory environment becomes more accommodating, which seems to be happening, which is encouraging. So yeah, Clint, I know you touched on a few points just now, but what do you think are the main barriers you've seen to this adoption?
So just to extrapolate on that though, old traditions whereby what has worked before will work again. And this is where the market is getting left behind. And there's also this thinking that PropTech is this, you know, it's this platform on your phone, or it's an app, or it's an online portal, but it's actually an entire environment. And there's hundreds of tools, which I mentioned before, which can be used to incorporate into your daily activity and tasks. And, you know, just going back, traditional agents shouldn't fear an inevitable change in the property industry, because it's coming really quick. I mean, we look weekly, daily. There's so many countries around the world that have adopted a full tech approach in how transactional property sales are done. We have the guys like Open Negotiation in Oz and New Zealand, which contribute to the 70% plus number of transactional deals done online. Go have a look at what 10X are doing in the US, what Alsop and Alsop are doing in Dubai. There's a very frightening contrast to what is happening there and what's happening in South Africa at the moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. Something always worth, I think, highlighting is the case studies from other markets. You know, obviously every market's unique and dynamic, but it's very interesting to see the scale of that activity there and perhaps lessons we could learn. So thanks for those insights. And then Wayne, on your side, what are the barriers? I think also,
yeah, well,
it's interesting.
I guess it's been touched on by everyone, is the habits of adoption. So taking it from the buyer perspective, take it from the real estate agent perspective, you know, in general, we don't, as humans, we don't like change. And unfortunately or fortunately, change is a constant. So we've got to sort of expect it. And you need to sort of have an adoption culture. Like I say, I believe that historically, because South Africa has had, and I guess the world too, from COVID, has had a big leapfrog in digital adoption. And it has made a lot of, let's say, more efficiencies already. You know, just as you can see, Zoom meetings and webinars as opposed to live events be a more practical example, right? And we're just more accustomed to these things. So that was a barrier. And I think the culture of adoption is really what's been the biggest barrier for, let's say, the South African industry, where guys were interested in technology, but not necessarily willing to take the risk involved. And in the tech industry, you say fail fast, and failure is built into the model. So I'm just going in on the adoption side, both as, let's say, the real estate professional looking to improve their, you know, their business, and also from the first-time buyer or the person who wants to buy a property and wants to do it online. We sort of needed to. Historically, it wasn't, you know, ideal to use technology, as Clint mentioned. We want to go back to the old way. Or what we would find is people were very interested. They'd have the discussions, and they'll do everything, and then they will just either not move forward, or they would try do something that may not be, let's say, the best move. They'll go use an international technology, which will cost them a lot. It will take them a long time to get it live. They will go live and they'll find out that they had a lot of assumptions that weren't true. And then they would scrap the project, as opposed to get live quickly, feel it out, learn about, let's say, online transactions, if this is what you're trying to introduce to your agency or business, and sort of keep iterating until it sits really nicely. And then you've already added to your digital transformation of your business.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, those are some really interesting insights, I think, especially from the work that you've been doing. And as a big point I wanted to highlight here is we've touched on, obviously, traditional agents and brokers, and there's definitely, you know, room for adoption and for everyone to kind of embrace the change. And even if there is a fully digital offering versus like a hybrid or traditional, there is still space in the market for both. But I just wanted to ask, like, if you put your shoes on, Wayne, just like, obviously further, you just touched on some key points, but if you put yourself in the shoes of a traditional agent or broker or agency brokerage trying to innovate, what are the kind of the key pieces of advice or steps that you would advise them to take when kind of investigating the space and making, you know, the right decisions for what might work for them?
Well, first of all, it makes no sense to adopt Proptech to adopt Proptech. You know, you need to say, well, what are my current pain points in my business? You know, where am I really seeing bottlenecks or issues? And then to say, okay, what is my sort of, what am I willing to risk to solve that problem? If you, let's say you're a small brokerage, you do your set of deals, but you don't necessarily want to hire a full development team, then you need to you know, the best place to search or a good place to search is a Google search, and start to search for different technologies. You need an accounting package, you search online, that's in the cloud, you'll find Xero and a whole bunch of others, Sage Online, etc. You're looking, you know, to well, we've talked about Property 24 and private property, about listing your properties, but literally, if you're looking for project management tool or a CRM tool, you can look online and just make sure that there's an API and SDK, because that allows you to keep all your information in one place, and which is very important.
Awesome, thanks, Wayne. Clint, I know you mentioned some points in this as well. Is there anything you'd wanted to kind of focus in and highlight in terms of advice?
Just to, I think Wayne really summed it up. As long as it comes down to the ease of access, accessing information, processing time, I mean, that's quite important. We're dealing with a very on-demand consumer at the moment, and it's not just millennials or Generation X's. This is now going back to our grandparents, anyone that's got access to a smartphone, 5G, big data. So yeah, processing time and accountability, that's all.
Great, thanks. And then Inga, maybe from advice, I suppose you might give to residential agencies in terms of they're starting this journey or just trying to understand it, obviously without giving away any trade secrets, but just kind of general advice you'd have.
Yeah, well, I don't know how a principal would run an agency without technology, in terms of all the regulations and various rules and processes that they need to follow, the way that information has to be secured. Someone commented around the processes around POPI and the timelines. I think not having some form of a technology system to help you keep your ducks in a row, you must be a very impressive human being if you're able to do it without kind of some form of technology to assist you. I'm definitely going to agree with what Wayne said. If you're not using it, what's the point? It's something in our business. We do a lot of testing where we actually look at how the various people within our company actually use the system, because a lot of times there's features that people don't even use, and you're like, do you know that you can actually use that? And they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I could do that. So it's definitely about ensuring the usability. And then in terms of packages, just from previous experiences and also services that we use, make sure that there's in terms of those packages, if you're someone that's going to need support, make sure that there's going to be access to support in terms of training and developing. I think that's very important. When you look at the different pricing models, just make sure that you're going to get the support you need. And then also to build on, you need to make sure that you own your data. Your data is the most important thing. A lot of us have more data than we even know. It's something that's a cornerstone of our business, is looking at it. And I think in a couple of years, we're going to think, oh my word, we never looked at that thing, and it's incredible. But it's very important to own your data and make sure it's secure. So I think usability, functionality, if it's not, making things easier, why do it? And then just also remember, as anything, when we go through roadworks, it's a pain before the road is there. You need to know that it's going to be a change process. Change management is one of the hardest things you can do in any business, changing your employees' behavior. So I think it is choose the right changes, the right software, do your research, look at client reviews on those products, make sure that you're going to get the support from their kind of client service and sales team, and then be prepared that it's going to be a bit painful before it gets better. So I think those are the things that I would want to just add to that conversation.
Great, thanks, Inga. Yeah, really important point. I think any change can have its challenges, and I think you mentioned training is a big part of that. So if you've decided to implement something and it's going to obviously affect your team, people have to understand it and know how to use it. Otherwise, that value is not really going to be realized on the ground. And then your data's come up a few times, and obviously as soon as you hear data, you think POPI these days. So we've actually had a question from Jonathan on this, and I forgot to mention earlier, if you have any questions or comments, please pop them into the chat, and I'll pose those to the panel. So yeah, please feel free to do that. But yeah, so Jonathan's brought up POPI, and he says, like we've touched on, data plays a big part in Proptech, and he wanted to ask if anyone has any advice or applications on how the act has affected their business or their systems. So maybe some kind of real life impacts and how those have been dealt with. So maybe I'll start off with you, Clint.
So one thing you must always remember is that, I mean, I think we're all still getting our heads around the whole poppy thing. And I know we would have supposed to have implemented this fully now, but, you know, we're also learning. It's something new, you know, like that roadway that Inga mentioned as well. You know, it does get difficult before it gets easier. But one thing you must always remember is that just as it affects you, it affects your competitors as well. And that's where your thinking needs to come in. You really need to think, and I really hate this saying, you know, thinking out the box, but utilizing the tools in your arsenal, the tools that are online. There's so much freeware out there that you can really tap into, and, you know, have more of an online, more of a digital presence, you know. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. It affects all of us at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Yeah, just before moving on to Wayne, I just wanted to say, anyone who's obviously outside of South Africa, the POPI Act is a Protection of Private Information Act. So it's obviously regulating how we can use personal data as businesses or organizations, and how that is needs to be stored and in, you know, reasonable ways and protected. So there's a lot of regulations coming in. Obviously, you've seen this in a lot of other parts of the world, and it's super crucial, as data is so important, like we say. So yeah, Wayne, I just wanted to say, on your side as a provider, have you had to kind of change some of your products or think about things differently at all?
Well, the way to look at POPI is actually more like it's like a process change. You used to acquire databases in different ways. You used to engage with these databases in different ways. And now what's just happening is that you need to change the way you engage. So what I would advise anyone who's concerned about POPI is to get the right advice, to get legal advice on what they can do. Because generally, I'm talking from a Proptech perspective, you're going to need to add some stuff into your disclaimers, and then you've got to look at the process of how you communicate and apply, let's say, certain processes to your processes, and then it should be fun. Look, in the end of the day, people that want your communication will continue to, you know, want it and will receive it, and they won't complain. And if somebody doesn't want to receive communication from you, ideally in your mailers, you should have an unsubscribe when you're sending out to let's say groups of people. And if they can subscribe, then on that sort of basis point, obviously this is very basic and you need to do your own research, you should be relatively safe.
Yeah, no, good point. There's some fairly straightforward fixes or solutions in place that, you know, can mean that everyone, both sides of the coin, are protected. Inga, is there anything you wanted to add perhaps from your experience? I know you touched on it.
Yeah, so it's definitely, you know, as Clint mentioned, it's a moving goalpost. It's something that you constantly are improving on and learning from. And as we all know, there hasn't been any legislation, there hasn't been any rulings in court on this. So we still need to see how the court is actually going to interpret the act. And so therefore it will change. The way we understand it will change in the coming years. The one thing that I see as a real positive is it really puts a focus on securing your information and securing your clients' information. You know, at our business, it's something that we constantly do. It's a major part of our development costs or developer focus, is actually ensuring that we secure, you know, we're seeing the onslaught of hackers from, you know, Russia and all over the world trying to attack us and stuff. So I do think that the kind of focus on it and really having the, you know, not just the reputational threat, but the legislative threat, I think it's really great that brands and clients really have to focus on protecting people's information and making sure that it's secure. So I do think we need to try and see the positive. And the one thing that we've seen with clients is, as long as you're being respectful and you're doing your best, and it's a, you know, it's definitely a process of getting it in there, and definitely get the right advice. There's some great consultancies out there to help you to make, you know, understand of it. And then I think as long as you're offering a valuable service and you bring value, clients will be happy to receive your information. And then what, you know, Wayne said, make sure that clients have the opportunity to opt out and opt in, and whether and what it might be, and then just have your interpretation of it and stick with it. And then we still need to see what the court's going to make of it and who's going to be the first person to. Hopefully, it's none of us in this webinar, but I think it's going to be an interesting time in terms of this. But I do think it's good. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to add.
Right. No, thanks very much. It's obviously affects all businesses, organization, even individuals in some way. So it's good to get those insights from on the ground. And yeah, it is like Inga said, it is a good thing at the end of the day, even though it might mean a bit of sort of homework and maybe some pain in implementing things, but it's really crucial at the end of the day, as data is so important. I just wanted to step back and just to say again, your questions are welcome. We'll probably be tying up in about 10 minutes or so. So if you've got any burning questions, please shoot them into the chat there. But yeah, just to take a step back, we obviously talked about a lot of points, pain points, opportunities, experience and advice and adoption. I just wanted to kind of bring it down to the commercial sector versus the residential sector. So are there any key sort of points in terms of pain points, opportunities and experience you've had? I know some of you obviously play in either sector mostly, but maybe there's some insights you can have from what you've seen in terms of the other parts of the sector and property types. So Wayne, have you seen perhaps some key differences or opportunities?
Well, I guess we have to acknowledge that the commercial sector and the residential sector are very different. Very different buyers, very different requirements. But where they are the same or very similar is that they both have been adopting Proptech. On the transactional side, so just from the auction and tender side, well, more let's say auction, we don't see many household tenders, but listing a property, a residential property, or listing a commercial property on an online transactional platform doesn't really have much difference. It still will work the same way. Just the dynamics of the buyer and the dynamics of the seller will change pretty much. In the rental space, we see once again, transactions also relate to renting, but we do see very different habits, requirements, etc. in the renting space. But on the sales side, I found that the processes can be very similar. Great.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, obviously very, very different in a lot of ways. I think your customer or the consumer, obviously there's key differences and probably, needs and objectives, I think, and how people operate. But Clint, from your side, have you got some comments there?
So yeah, I mean, again, Wayne summed it up perfectly. But just in addition to that, again, it's a very different profile of buyer that we're dealing with when it comes to commercial industrial property. Often the values are much higher. There's bigger investors at play, and most of the time, due diligence needs to be conducted beforehand. And that's the nice thing about having our online platform. It's a vastly superior streamlined process, because all that information in terms of the due diligence documents are all available up front. When the guy comes down to bid on the day, his financing, absolutely everything is approved, and he knows exactly what he's getting himself into. So on the auction side of things, it eliminates the time wasters. It keeps the covenant of the buyer a lot stronger. And yeah, and there's also a time aspect, because it takes out, almost a month in the transfer process, because now there's no finance that needs to be taken out afterwards though. So that's really the only difference when it comes to the commercial side. Obviously, again, like Wayne says, as far as the listing is concerned, between residential, commercial, probably exactly the same, just coming online with the auction platform. Those documents, everything needs to be handled up front.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Clint. So, the point that you highlighted that it's really crucial is due diligence. Obviously, mostly, I suppose, known to operate in the commercial sector, but across the transaction chain, that due diligence of different parties helping make informed decisions is really crucial. And with application of Proptech, etc., that can be integrated in a better way, I'd imagine. which can help everyone at the end of the day. Inga, on your side, I know probably also mostly on the residential perspective, but is there anything you'd like to add?
I think it's maybe the frequency of transactions. So in terms of the, residential sales, most people maybe buy 2 or 3 properties and buy and sell maybe 1 or 2. So, and it's normally, on average on a 7-year cycle, where with rentals and commercial space, you might have individuals that, have transactions way more frequently. So I think, once again, you've got a broad spectrum of customers and the ease of use of transactions that I think education in the residential sales part is a big thing, in terms of people not having understanding of transaction and wanting to apply kind of, Consumer Protection Act or the way that they would purchase a product, and not understanding that there's way more technical, complexity. It's taken me a while to understand the difference between patent and latent defects and all of those kind of things. So I think it's a lot to do with your customers and their ability and understand of the transaction, and education, where in rentals, a person might rent a property, 3 or 4 different properties in their lives, or even more. So I think it's around the education and the understanding of the clients you deal with. I haven't personally been in commercial, but I'm assuming that you're dealing with clients that maybe do those kind of transactions on a more frequent basis.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, obviously very dynamic sectors, but it's clear that there's opportunity on both sides to apply new solutions and new ways of doing things. I think we're basically coming to the end of our webinar. So I'll just give everyone another last chance for any questions or comments they want to pop in the chat. And just on my side, I think it's been a great discussion. So thanks to our panelists. I think it's really clear there's some real opportunity, and there's some real there's obvious pain points that can be addressed, and things can be done in different ways and better ways, and sometimes at times. And there really is, like we've a few people have touched on. I think it's not something to be perhaps worried about or to get concerned about in terms of the changing industry and your role as if you're an agent or broker or another property professional. I think there's a way for everyone to benefit, and for traditional and sort of pure digital agencies, I think there's a place for them to fit. And I think maybe a hybrid approach, just sort of from my view and the activity I'm seeing, there's definitely ways to service clients in different ways. And at the end of the day, that's going to be, better for you and your offering. And I guess you can build a brand around that. And then you might attract customers from obviously both pools who want to do things, because, at the end of the day, the way we're doing things are changing. And, like a few of the panelists have touched on, consumers and businesses, they want to look at doing things in a more efficient way. And that can mean in terms of time and cost, etc. So there really is some great activity out there, and I think it's an area that I personally find very interesting. And I think there's a lot more opportunity out there for more Proptechs to enter, and more service or software providers to come along and enable people to do things differently. So yeah, I think it's been a great discussion, and I just wanted to give all the panelists an opportunity, maybe just to make a final comment or suggestion or anything you might want to share. Wayne, if there's anything from your side.
Well, just to address anyone who's looking to digitally transform their real estate businesses, it doesn't matter how big your steps are. Ideally, you want to even take baby steps, but identify your pain points, see what you're looking to solve, and then do a little bit of a search and do some research. And generally, you want to fail fast. So you want to try something, you want to have low risk, you want to enter the market very quickly. And if it doesn't work out for you, then you find an alternative and you keep going. But today there should be for 99.5% of what you're trying to do in the real estate industry, there should be a software for you to license to save you the upfront building costs and the maintenance going on.
Great, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, those options are definitely out there and available. So important to keep that in mind. Clint, any closing comments or thoughts on your side? Oh, Clint, sorry, just on mute there.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened.
No,
Just to keep it brief, I feel that realtors out there, need to take decisive action in their decisions to either be a force online, operating in a digital or a hybrid environment. And yeah, explore the tools that are out there, but just be careful on which tools you use, because you don't want to, adopt something just for the sake of being in prop tech, and it's something that really slows you down. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Clint. Inga, on your side, closing thoughts?
I just want to echo with what you're saying. I definitely don't think technology will ever be able to remove the property professional out of the transaction completely. And then I think, just building on what Wayne and Clint said, you need to ensure that those programs add value to your business. So either enabling you to do more, to do better, or bringing value to your clients. So understanding, put yourself in your customer's position and saying, what are the things that would make their lives easier, and how can I bring that to them with technology? And then I think it's also just important to also think about not to be everything to everyone, and maybe think, how can I be the best what I'm doing, and focus on that. So also not just for PropTech to be PropTech. If there are things that are not applicable to you, maybe you're in a niche market or do something specific, think about how that impacts your business as well.
Awesome, yeah, great point there. I mean, that is, I think it doesn't matter what industry you are, in terms of business or adopting tech, it's definitely can be a bit of a downfall to try do something that serves everyone or meets every need. So yeah, there's a lot of room for specialization. We've seen that part and parcel of the property industry. There's a lot of room for specialization around services or property types, etc. So yeah, that's a really cool point. Thanks for raising that. Yeah, and just on my side, just in terms of the general PropTech picture, just on closing thoughts from me, there's a lot involved in this value chain in the property industry, but particularly around transactions, and we've touched on a few things. So there's that case of being a service provider involved in sales or rentals in some way, and then there's also other specific things in terms of opportunity for PropTech. So Wayne mentioned in terms of virtual tours, different methods for people to view properties, the listing sector, and how that can work, and how you can do things differently, and obviously servicing, interacting with your clients as an agency or a brokerage. And then also there's things moving on to finance, maybe alternative finance products. There's bond origination. We've seen a lot of exciting things, obviously probably another discussion on its own. And then also even though the process is still embedded in the deed registry, which operates in a fairly manual way, there's still ways to innovate and guide people along the process, which we see, tracking the progress of your home transaction, etc. So yeah, there's a lot of different elements, and I just wanted to highlight that before we close. But obviously I think it's very clear there's some great activity happening, and great opportunity still for people to enter in different areas, whether you're a specialist or you're an agent, brokerage, lots to do. So yeah, with that, I think we're gonna end off, and I just want to thank you again very much, Inga, Clint, Wayne, Aidan. Great to have you with us, and thanks very much for sharing your insights and your experience. I think you've all done a great job and left us with a lot to think about. And then also thank you to all of our attendees. Thanks for taking out the time and joining us. The session is recorded, like I said earlier, so we will share the link in due course. And you're obviously welcome to share that and watch that at your leisure. So with that, I wish everyone a good evening. I hope you keep warm if you're in South Africa. I think we're all a bit chilly. And yes, stay safe and keep well. And thanks again. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Bye.